Today's episode of This Week in Startups is brought to you by SurveyMonkey. Go to try.surveymonkey.com/twist and sign up for a free trial. And MailChimp. Manage lists with up to 2,000 subscribers and send 12,000 emails per month for free with MailChimp.
Hey everybody, today on the program it's our patent episode. We're going to learn what patents are, how to get them, how to defend them, and what all this patent troll stuff is all about. Stick with us.
That's what it's all about, man. They said money is the root of all evil. What? Funny how it feeds my people. Yeah. We ain't gonna live like equals until we get the money, spend the money, and defeat you. Yeah. Money is the root of all evil. What? Funny how it feeds my people. Yeah. We ain't gonna live like equals until we get the money, spend the money, and defeat you.
Introducing the newest members of the This Week in Startups producer program.
Yes. One of the questions we get every week on This Week in Startups and on the mailing list, the back channel, is patents. Intellectual property comprises a whole bunch of different things. You've heard about copyright, you've heard about trademark. Today we're going to focus just on patents, patent trolls, getting patents, all that kind of stuff. I am here, of course, with my partner in crime, Tyler. How are you doing?
How many patents have you been involved in, Jacob?
0.0.
Zero?
I've never, when you're creating content, you're more involved in trademarks
True.
or copyright, not patents.
Sure.
I mean, what am I going to patent about Engadget or Silicon Valley Reporter or This Weekend?
Good point.
I'm patenting.
You're a creative dude, but I guess...
I mean, I don't invent hardware or software stuff like that. And most of the stuff I'm building are brands.
Yeah.
Brand building.
But you like to really compete on the...
in the market?
And the execution in the market.
Well, I mean, if business patents, which we'll get into, were like a real thing, I guess I could file some business patents processes for doing stuff. But I sort of feel like those are bogus. But we'll get into all that.
I've done one now, and that's with our guest here today, Reid.
Yeah. So thank you for the segue there, Reid Dammann. Am I pronouncing that correct?
Dammann, yeah.
D-A-M-M-A-N-N.
Yeah, a lot of M's,
Two M's, two N's. Dammann. You are an intellectual property attorney at Music Peeler and Garrett?
Peeler and Garrett.
Peeler and Garrett.
Yeah.
Sorry, my dyslexia is showing today.
Okay.
So you've been doing IP and patents for how long?
About 6 or 7 years.
Yeah. And how many of those have you filed?
Oh, of patents?
Yeah.
Oh, probably in the hundreds.
Hundreds.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And so you're gonna play the role of attorney on the program today.
Sure.
And then in the role of inventor is, of course, Dave Mathews, the founder of NeuAer and the creator of the CueCat.
The worst invention ever.
The worst invention ever.
But I'm the most prolific inventor you've ever had on your studio
Absolutely.
Is that trademark? Worst invention ever?
Worst invention ever?
I could trademark that as part of the episode.
I think PC World did that.
You have 71 patents.
Granted, yes. Many more pending. We're hoping, I need to get 100 by 50. That's my goal. 100
by the age of 50?
Wow.
Yeah. Okay, so we have an attorney who has, on the program today, attorney who has filed hundreds of these, and we've got an inventor who has 70 plus granted, and we'll have over 100 by the time it's 50. So we've got really, really qualified people here to educate us. And to be honest, I'm a bit of a neophyte on this myself, so it's going to be an interesting episode, and we're all going to get to learn. Hey, and a way to learn about your customers and the world is SurveyMonkey.
Wait, you can't just use MailChimp's EEE on SurveyMonkey.
I can't?
No.
I got to come up with a new one?
Yeah. First of all, monkeys make different sounds than chimps.
That's a gorilla, right?
That's a gorilla.
I don't know what
like a hoo hoo hoo. Like a, yeah. There you go. Yeah.
Anyway, the point is, SurveyMonkey, I did one today for the launch conference. We had the tablet conference last week. I did a SurveyMonkey asking people what they thought of the conference, what they pay for tickets, who they thought were the best speakers. My God, I can't believe I don't do this every time. I always forget to do a survey of people who come and experience my products, and I always regret it if I don't do it because it's just so much knowledge is lost. But so much knowledge is gained when you do it, and so I really encourage everybody to use SurveyMonkey. I've been using it for 3 years, I think. It's when I started my pro account, and it's super affordable. Go ahead and use the discount code TWiST.
Free trial.
And you get a free trial of the Platinum and Gold plans. What? Oh, that's awesome. So
it's also, I got to say, for the people...
Oh, you know what? But you don't put it in a code. You got to put it in this URL. Try.surveymonkey.com/twist. try.surveymonkey.com/twist. It's a bit of a mouthful. We're going to have to tweet that as well and put it on the website, guys.
It's on the screen behind you.
Oh, is it on the screen? Great. Try.surveymonkey.com/TWiST. Please go try it today. And hey, the free plan is free with 10 questions and 100 responses per survey. So you can actually build a survey and experience the full product, including this question bank.
Yeah. I want to hear about that, but they may not want me to say this, but even if you're not necessarily interested in doing surveys, go look at an incredibly well done startup. Started small and scaled up and beautiful as a product. It's just
awesome. It's an incredible product. The product is very well designed, and what I was going to say is, you know how like forming a question and knowing how to form the answers is hard? Like, how old are you? You know, or how much do you like this product? How satisfied are you with this service? What, you know, how you frame the question can determine how people answer it.
Are you talking about leading the witness?
Exactly, exactly what I'm talking about. They have this question bank now where they've written every possible demographic question. Where do you live? How old are you? How much do you like X product? How satisfied were you with X? And it's like slightly satisfied, extremely satisfied, moderately satisfied, not satisfied, and not satisfied. You know,
that's interesting because doing a good survey, part of it is asking the right.
Exactly, and they do all that work for you, so you can put it together in seconds, and it's a really great product. Cool. I give it my highest recommendation.
There you go.
Surveymonkey.
Yeah.
There you go. Once again, I love the partners we have on the program because we whitelist the advertising, so it has to be a product Tyler or myself uses. Okay, let's get right into it. I told you we'd learn about patents. That's what we're going to do today. This is the patent episode. So.
I feel like I needed a tie for this episode.
That's all right.
I don't know if I'm being taken
I've been wearing
seriously.
a tie on the show because I find that when people tune in who have never watched the program before, when they see a guy with a tie and all that kind of stuff, well, this tie's a little bit, you know, I have to do it in the mirror, so it's like, look at that David Letterman thing going there.
Nice. You should have worn a lab coat.
I should have worn a lab coat. No, I find when people tune into the program and they see this, they just think, oh, that guy's credible. So I feel like wearing a tie is a small price to pay for added credibility.
The lab coat would have made me super credible as an inventor. I'm just saying.
Absolutely, and a microscope. You can wear like
I need a monocle.
A monocle, perfect. Okay, so why a patent? What is a patent? We have your little presentation here that you gave. What did you give this at?
At Anderson, yeah.
Oh, at Anderson.
The college dropout. Dave Mathews speaks at Anderson.
Yeah, that's pretty much the way it goes. The people who drop out are the best ones. So you say here, why a patent? Patent holders receive exclusive rights to make, use, or sell an invention, design, or plant.
Yeah, turns out there's a plant patent.
A plant as in an actual edible plant.
Yeah,
like
well, whatever it is. I think Monsanto really went after this one.
Yeah, exactly.
And really capitalized on it.
And the patentee must file a detailed description of the invention, which is published by the government. This is the process. Public disclosure provides droves of information. You get to see all that at the site.
Yep.
And some companies prefer to protect their inventions called trade secrets, kept private to maintain a company's competitive advantage, the Coke formula.
Yep. So that the whole trade secret thing is something that really doesn't get a lot of play, but when you think about it, a patent is a roadmap to make whatever it is that you're living on as an inventor. So if you put all those pieces that are all publicly discernible, you're like, well, wait a minute, anyone can rip this off and copy it. So a lot of companies use trade secrets, so they'll patent some aspects, but the trade secrets might be how a database works or something that's hidden behind the scenes.
And so there is a United States Patent and Trademark Office that does this.
Well, I guess this is a good one for
Department of Commerce, yeah.
The Department of Commerce.
Yeah, they basically handle all the patents and trademarks that go through.
How long has this existed? What is the history of this? How did this come about?
That's a really good question.
Hundreds of years. It's like,
and we don't know it.
Yeah, so let me pull this up here.
That's a good question.
Hundreds of years.
Yeah.
Hundreds of years.
There's a website for this. It's really terrible.
I mean, for patents, it goes back to our Constitution. I think it's in Article 3 or something like that, to promote the progress of the sciences and useful arts, that kind of thing.
Right. And so the point of a patent is what?
It's kind of to protect the functionality of something.
The functionality.
Functionality. So you can have a process, a machine, a manufacturer, a composition. You kind of protect the way it works, the way software maybe interacts with a computer or a processor.
And how long does a patent last?
You get 20 years from the date of filing.
And has it always been 20 years, or is that something that's been extended recently?
It was after 95. I think before 95, it was 17 years from the date of grant. And so you could sit pending in the patent office for however long, waiting for others to come along and maybe infringe that, and then kind of bring it through, and you still get your 17 years. So now they're pushing you to go through.
And so let's talk about the patent process. It's very expensive from what I hear, and I have a little bit of a chart here from the patent office, which is the process for obtaining a patent. It says here you have to check to see if it's already been patented. Has your invention actually come out before? Yeah. That involves doing a search?
Yeah, it's a prior art search, and that can be completely time-consuming because there's, what, hundreds of thousands, millions of thousands?
I mean, I think there was 500,000 applications last year filed. So
500,000 patent applications were filed last year.
I mean, just for granted patents, I think they just issued, 8 million not too long ago. So there's a lot. There's a lot of prior art. And there's not an affirmative act that someone needs to engage in a search before filing something. It's a business decision at that point. So.
Right. So it's kind of seeing if somebody has covered this ground before.
Right. But it's not even just patents. I mean, prior art is everything ever published, ever.
So prior art means
everything.
This existed previously in the world.
Published. Publicly.
Yeah. Publicly existed, not in somebody's brain. Not in a book that I mailed to not in a piece of paper I mailed to myself with a stamp.
It could be in a trade journal. It could be a white paper from a company. It could be any kind of prior art.
And this is why when we hear about a patent fight that occurs, people say we're looking for prior art.
That's the first thing. Yeah, you try to invalidate the patent that's being asserted against you. So.
So if Apple comes out with a patent to protect swiping, if swiping existed in Minority Report, let's say before they're patented. That would be prior art?
Sure.
Even in fiction?
It's got to be enabling. I mean, you really have to show somebody how to make and use it. There's got to be enabling. So if somebody who's skilled in the art can look at that disclosure and figure out how to make and use it, then it's prior art.
Got it.
And skilled in the art is an interesting term as well.
Yeah, it is.
So that's used all over intellectual property.
Nobody really knows what it means.
Right, but it's like
skilled in the art.
Yeah, it's like Tyler knows about web services. And if Tyler saw something that was a process, like I love the Amazon one-click patent, which Apple has licensed. So
which is nonsense.
I think so.
We all think so, right? Yeah. I mean, one-click purchasing existed before, like in soda machines.
I think it's much more involved than that. Have you looked at the claims of that thing? I mean, I think there's a lot to it. It's not just a single one-click. It's
But Tyler, who knows web services, you could argue that he was skilled in the art and he knew commerce systems and he could do a one button to buy.
Right. So wait, because he could do it.
Well, this is
he could figure it out. If he could see that reference and figure out how to do it, then that's prior art. That's considered prior. That's the person who's skilled in the art.
So if he saw a one-click purchase occur at some point previously and could figure it out.
I know we're using the one-click, and I didn't read the claims of the one-click patent, but any kind of disclosure, if a person who's skilled in the art can look at it and kind of make and use it, then it's considered prior art.
Got it. And so then what you have to figure out here, it says what type of application are you filing, a design patent, a utility patent, or a plant patent?
Yeah, I've never really done plant patents before.
I just thought it was fun to talk about, especially in California. I'm sure there's some great medicinal marijuana.
Yeah, it says here a new variety of asexually produced
plants. It's got to be hybrids or something like that.
Are people patenting marijuana, cannabis plants?
So I've never done a drug in my life, but I'm not the right expert.
Not the right expert to know.
I'm sure there's some.
But you read about Monsanto. I think Monsanto has plant patents on seeds and things like that.
Yeah. So there's a design patent, which is ornamental characteristics, and a utility patent.
Yeah, so a design is more of an article of manufacture. Like an example would be like a hood of a BMW car, or a BMW or a tail or something like that.
You can patent a grill on a car?
I don't know if you can patent it specifically. I'm not exactly sure, but that's patent eligible subject matter, sure. I think I filed a couple design patents for patio chairs.
Really?
Ornamental design for a patio chair, yeah.
So if somebody, and that to me sounds more like copyright, like a creative work. What's the difference there?
It's a big overlap. Yeah.
A big overlap? Is there really?
Sure. Yeah. Oh, definitely.
So do people file both then? If I want to make an Ames chair or something like that, like this famous chairs, they would file a patent to end?
Well, copyright is more visual graphic works, sculptures, things like that. And designs are extended to articles of manufacture. So they overlap, and the standards are different, and also the damages are different.
Right.
So generally you see that both you file a copyright and a design patent. And also there's overlap with trademark as well. And they all have different damages components and things like that.
And a utility patent, which is the most common, is a useful process, machine, article of manufacture, composition of matter.
Right.
That was a design patent there, by the way.
Which is why software is such a prickly pear on this, because it's not hardware. Right, it's code.
It's a useful process,
it's a machine,
I guess.
right?
Is that what it falls under?
You end up patenting the software and the way it interacts with the processor.
Right.
It causes the computer to display certain things, and you tie it in like that.
Yeah, it leverages the computer as the machine.
Got it. And so your worst invention ever was obviously CueCat. We've joked about it before, but this was a reader that would read. This was like the original red. This is like red laser before iPhones existed. You could read a barcode on your home computer. Mm-hmm. You happened to design it in the form of a horribly disgusting, poorly designed cat.
Yep. We figured you already had a mouse for your computer.
Right.
So we
You
needed
had the
to do
terrible idea
a cat.
of making it a cat.
And this actually is a design patent.
Almost like a Simpson episode or something. Like, this is like something that like Ralph Cramden would design, trying to get Ed Norton to. Yeah, no, anyway, it made sense at the time. It was plugged in. This is way before any kind of wireless.
Yep. Yeah, no Wi-Fi back then.
But barcode readers existed.
They did, but the process of taking a barcode and converting that to a web page on the internet did not exist. So that was a method patent. So we had several patents, and I call this a picket fence strategy. And as you're building a company,
what is a picket fence strategy?
So you want to build a wall, just as if you were a king, you'd want a castle wall with a moat around it and alligators. With building companies, you want the same kind of strategy, where you try and patent every iterance of the way someone could maybe copy your idea, and you build this wall, and you can't build out everything. You can just build out little picket fences of it.
Yes.
So you can try and keep companies, in our case, it was keeping Microsoft and keeping Sony, keeping those types of companies at bay from taking our idea and profiting on it.
And you can get a patent published even if it's not defensible. Right? Like, many people have patents overturned later. Like if prior art is discovered.
Oh, sure.
So the patent process is I submit it, right? I fill out some sort of form. Is that let's get into the nitty gritty of this. What is the form I fill out?
More than a form. It's this is the minutia of writing. This is heavily detailed information.
Right. And so what is it? Let's talk about the actual forms.
So I mean, I think it's not really a form. It's an application that's got a bunch of different sections. And the first section is kind of the background section. You kind of talk about the prior art and what's kind of wrong with the area that you're kind of to develop in. So after that becomes kind of an area called the detail description. As you describe the invention, along with however number of figures it takes for you to illustrate the invention, with reference numerals and those kinds of things, and you go back and forth and you talk about all the different components of it. So, and then kind of the meat and potatoes of a patent application is kind of the claims. You know, I claim this. You know, I claim
that
a chair
it does X, Y, and Z.
Right. So if I have invented a new and useful chair, it would be I claim a chair with a back, a base, and 4 legs made of wood. That kind of thing. So that's kind of the enforceable component of the granted patent. And then those claims are kind of are defined by what's in the application, which is called the specification.
Okay, so here I have a patent from a company. I just pulled up a random one here. This is from a company called Apple Computer, Inc., from 2004. And the abstract says, a touch panel having a transparent capacitive sensing medium configured to detect multiple touches or near touches that occur at the same time and at distinct locations on the plane of the touch panel, and to produce distinct signals representative of the location and touches on the plane of the touch panel for each multiple touches is disclosed.
This is one of my favorites. This is the multi-touch patent.
This is multi-touch. So this would be the patent for pinching.
Exactly.
The pinching patent,
if
you will. So they did an abstract. That's just a general explanation. Does this abstract have legal bearing, or is it just to help organize the patent?
No, it actually can be used to define the claims that are in the patent application. If the patent attorney had said something kind of different in the abstract, the defense could construe a term in the claim to mean something else.
And now we see that this has 31 claims in it. Is that a large number of claims for a patent?
I think it's average.
It's average.
It's average. I think in between 1 and 20 is kind of that's more kind of the average, but 30 is not large.
And it says here, the first one, a touch panel having a transparent capacitive sensing medium configured to detect multiple touches or near touches that occur at the same time at distinct locations of the plane of the touch panel, and to produce distinct signals representative of the location of the touches on the plane. So
that's unique because the abstract is the same as the first claim.
Right.
They might have changed a couple of words, but typically the abstract is just kind of like the summary of what you're going to read within the patent.
Got it. So I'm trying to find something in here where I actually could understand it.
Look at the detailed description part.
Okay.
Yeah, so the claims are what's most important. When you go to litigation, if you try and sue someone, what you're suing is, what is claimed is A, B, C, D, or actually it's 1, 2, 3, 4. And the first claim will be the broadest. The subsequent claims will be tweaks and twists on that first claim. And the stronger your first claim is, the more you have a more valuable or powerful patent.
So let's pick another line from this. God, I mean, this is, I can't even understand any of this.
Yeah, these are great to read when you want to go to sleep. When you're really high strung, these will really slow you down.
So then we go to description.
Now this is the paragraph. This is where you get into the kind of the story about how it was invented, and then a lot of times it might say some things like, in the past there was a membrane touch panel, and capacitive is better because it adds the ability for multiple fingers to be detected. And I'm just making all this up, but this is what I would write if I were doing this.
Right, which is sort of what they say. The present invention relates generally to an electronic device having a touch screen, more particularly the present invention relates to a touch screen capable of sensing multiple points at the same time.
No, that's the present, that's this invention.
That's this invention.
And then if you go like, in the past, it will be this. There's several types of touchscreen technologies, including resistive, capacitive, and infrared, surface acoustic. So that 06 is when you get into the old school products. So this is the story where it says, here, and a lot of this goes back to the patent examiner, which are generally first-year guys that, you know, the examiners aren't very sophisticated, typically.
So you're educating those folks.
The examiners are typically scientists and engineers, and so they see these kinds of patents. The USPTO is broken up into different art units. And so for software or network type applications, it'll go to an examiner that just sees those kinds of things. So you're trying to educate the examiner as to what you think the invention is, and the examiner's coming back because the examiner is bound by this manual of patent examining procedure. And so the USPTO says the examiner has to look at A, B, and C and make sure that you're complying with A, B, and C. So.
And here in number 8 it says, one problem found in all of these technologies, I guess previous technologies, is that they are only capable of reporting a single point even when multiple objects are placed on the sensing surface. That is, they lack the ability to track multiple points of contact simultaneously. In resistive and capacitive technologies, an average of all simultaneous occurring touch points are determined, and a single point which falls somewhere between the touch points is reported. So it triangulates. In surface wave and infrared technology, it's impossible to discern the exact position of multiple touch points that fall on the same horizontal lines due to masking. In either case, faulty results are generated. So what are they trying to say here? Is this is the difference?
This is the problem.
This is the problem we
We're
solve.
solving it with this new method, which is capacitance, and
at this point in time, nobody had ever thought of pinching a screen.
That's what's amazing with what Apple has done, right? They looked at Park and the mouse, and they made everyone want and need a mouse.
Right.
And then there were trios and things where you'd use a stylus to write on the screen. But remember, it was that squishy screen? That was that membrane sensor that would get scratched, and you could dig into it with a pen and whatever. So they created the next paradigm, which was this whole twisty, flippy, pinchy, flare out. And this is what's been amazing with Apple's ability to create new gestures and new interfaces and new ways for humans to interact with machines.
Now, should this be patentable? Like, when you think about the swipe, right? I could swipe at a magazine.
You could swipe at a fly, right?
I could swipe at a fly. Like, it seems so natural, and while pinching to make something smaller does not, that doesn't exist as an analog in the real world. Nor does
I crush your head.
I crunch your head does, but you know, what's the story with that? If something exists in the real world, like flipping pages does in a magazine or a book, obviously, if I just put that on a computer screen, is that patentable?
So this is where we get into these the troll patents and people trying to patent things that are so obvious. But if there hasn't been a digital equivalent, if someone actually went through the process, and the lines of software that it takes to measure and get rid of noise and jitter and actually make this screen work as fluid and as magical as it does, really could be a patent in itself. And maybe that's subsequent claims of that multi-touch patent. It talks about de-jitter and things like that. So there is very skilled coding that makes it so fluid.
They're patenting mechanisms that allow for waving your hand to move a page, not necessarily the concept of the UI of moving your hand moves the page. Is that right?
Right.
They're patenting the underlying mechanism that allow for that to happen.
Right.
So this process of making this form, are you capable of writing this stuff, or does an attorney write it for you? Yeah. Who writes this mind-blowing copy that not a normal human can't understand?
Yeah, most humans can only barely get by doing a provisional patent. And a provisional requires that you have a broad look at something. Maybe you want to get a couple claims in there in your world, you know, the peon English. But really, you have a year to have an attorney file the official IP, which is very much a structured document.
And where does this copy come from? That we're like this copy that we're reading in here, this text, is that an attorney's text? Is that an engineer's text?
Usually, yeah. I mean, patent attorneys are generally scientists and engineers. They have to be.
Ah.
I have several patent attorneys that I deal with, whether it's a product that's a consumer electronics device or a software patent or even a design patent. So I kind of have, because I've been doing this so long, different entities that I go to, and some have been engineers in the past, some have been designers in the past, right? So I kind of know which person to go to for which type of product, and they really interview me just as you'd be interviewed for a program, right? I mean, whatever. And that interview goes into something that's tape recorded, lots of typing. I give my own drawings, I give my own notes, and then this goes into a story, and that story can take weeks to write from a patent attorney. But a patent attorney is the one that assembles all of this concoction into this specific format.
So, in bottom line, you know, today can somebody without an attorney file a patent? In your estimation?
I'm sure they can. Whether or not it's enforceable is a whole other issue.
Right. So they don't have enough knowledge of how this intricate system works.
I'm sure there's plenty of independent inventors that do. They just need to study up on.
Would you agree that's like asking if someone could build their own iPhone app? Like, in theory you can, but there's a lot to know that is.
I mean, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of programming language in there you have to study up on. Sure. I mean, it's like anything. I'm sure you could learn it. Yeah. It just takes time.
So that's what I want to sort of get to when we get back from the commercial break, which is this system so convoluted and complex now that it has become the domain of the affluent and rich, the powerful, the big companies, and eventually the patent trolls who have funded themselves specifically to game this system when we get back from the commercial break. And, oh wow, this is a double monkey episode. MailChimp, boom, we're done. That's it. I should just do like a and we're done. Hey, MailChimp is an amazing product that, again, I use and have been using for a long time. It is the way I send my emails. If you're trying to send emails or build an email relationship with an audience, it's critical. Do you have an email list for all of your clients?
I do.
And how many people do you have on that email list?
Maybe 300, 400.
And so how do you send those emails? Just put them into BCC?
I haven't yet. I just compiled the list.
You just got the list.
It's an Excel spreadsheet.
Exactly. And that's where a lot of people are at. And what you need to do is get MailChimp, dump those emails in there, get them validated, and start subscribing. You know, did you know you can know how many people open it?
No.
Did you know you could organize them by what they're interested in? Yeah. You could say these people are interested in patents, these people are interested in copyright, etc. And then you could build a deep email relationship with those because your clients live in their email box. Do they know that you filed and had a successful patent published?
No.
Would you get more customers if they did?
Probably.
There you go. But you're not doing it. And why are you not doing it? The reason he's not doing it is because he's in Excel. This guy's he doesn't know how to send emails. He's an attorney, right?
Right.
You need to get MailChimp, and it's exactly designed for guys like you who have this following. You can just go in there, boom, in a couple clicks, you got all your emails, you can see how many people open it, you can organize them by city, by interest, all of these things. And by the way, if you have 2,000 subscribers or less, and you send less than 12,000 emails per month, it's free. So for a guy like you, they'll make it free until you get to the point at which you have over 2,000 subscribers, which if you did send it once a month with, hey, here's all the patents that we filed, and check them out, and if you have any questions, let me know. If you did just that, I guarantee you would have 10 times as many people on that email list in a year from now. And hey, the Social Pro feature lets you sort your list by cloud score, so you can figure out of those 300 people, who has the most Twitter followers? Wouldn't that be interesting?
That would be interesting.
Maybe you want to invite them to a dinner party or something. Or a seminar. Maybe you give a free seminar on filing patents and what people need to know about business patents. Wouldn't you like to know, of those 300 people, who are the 50 most influential people to invite to that dinner party or to that seminar? And you can tweak the language process, blah, 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 blah. We did that feature already. Hey, and there's no contract. It's just, you just fill it up with credits, you use it as you go, and the free plan is always free. I use MailChimp for all my needs, and you should use it as well. This is a perfect example. Right, Tyler? Yep. A lot of guys, gals out there, they have small businesses, they've got a following, but they're not communicating with those people on a regular basis. And you're probably thinking, oh, you should have Facebook, I should have Twitter. No, email. That email's for life for those people. They got a Gmail address. They will use it for the next 20 or 30 years. So you get that sign up one time, not like, oh, I got to put it on my MySpace page or my Facebook page. Okay, when we went to commercial break, I asked the critical question, which is, just looking at this, it's so complex that you yourself, an inventor genius who made the wonderful CueCat.
Can you say genius again?
The genius who made the CueCat, the worst invention of all time. You can't even file this stuff.
No.
You're like Wile E. Coyote. Genius. And so you need to pick and choose the attorneys who have technical skills to do it. The process for doing this, from what I understand, $50,000?
No.
Oh, that's not high.
To the
Tens of thousands.
Tens of thousands. 20,000. So $20,000, $30,000 to get to the published phase, you think?
So yeah, because the published phase, what we didn't really get into is after you write it, after you spend months crafting this document, then you have to wait months or years for the USPTO to reply back and say...
Months or years?
It depends. Like one of my patents in there, it's taken 9, go to the front of that, it's taken 9-something years to grant. So this idea...
9 years?
Yeah, because you have to get back rebuttals from the USPTO. Yeah. And that USPTO will say, hey, this claim conflicts with some other patent that's filed, and you didn't cite this. The citing is other patents.
How thorough are they? Because what I read in the paper is that they are so jammed up over there that they're just pushing stuff through.
There's a big backlog. There's a huge backlog. I heard there's about 700,000 applications that they're
700,000 are backed up.
I mean, I have clients that usually wait between 40 and 50 months before getting a first office action, which is the first kind of rejection.
40 or 50 months.
Yeah.
My math's not perfect, but I believe that's about 4 years.
Yeah.
The example here took 9 years, 1 month, and 28 days to grant.
And now...
But it's important to know that you can get some of that back on patent term. Not all of that is just taken off your 20 years.
Speak English, patent term.
Well, so the date of filing, it's 20 years that they're granted 20 years from the date of filing for enforcing. So if it takes 9 years to get through the office, you can get some of that back through patent term adjustment and extension. So,
so you can lobby them and say, hey, you took 9 years, I want 5 back?
They allot for a 3-year delay. And if there's a delay on the patent office side, they'll give it back to you in term at the end. So it's not that you have 9 years left. You know,
right.
Depends on the situation.
Depends on the situation, but they may. And that situation is if it's their fault, if they're backed up.
Yeah, there's a lot of rules behind that. Yeah, versus if it was your fault or you appealed. I'm not exactly sure, but if the delay is on their part, then they'll give it back to you.
So, what patent was this for? This one that is taking 9 years.
So that's launching a web browser in response to scanning a product code. So this was one of the picket fences around the process of enabling a UPC code, which does not contain any routing information to the internet. It's not like an IP address, it's just a number. But it's converting that number into a destination on the web.
Got it. So having a database. You patented having a database of these things. Yeah, I mean, do you consider that like a really patentable thing? I guess you do because you filed a patent.
Yeah, and it was granted, and it's...
9 years ago it was probably very novel at the time.
It was, I guess. At the time now, it just seems like, God, with all these products. So does that mean you have a claim against someone like Red Laser?
They're actually licensors of our technology. So not Red Laser specifically, but a lot of the app companies fall under indemnification of the handset manufacturers because the OS or the device license our IP.
So you license to those folks.
I go upstream.
You go upstream.
The money's upstream. Red Laser doesn't have any money.
Right, so you...
Well, actually they do now. They got bought by, eBay a year ago, right?
So you go to the patent handset and said, hey, your handset is doing X, Y, and Z, or you want to enable it to do X, Y, and Z.
Right. Yep. So that's called indemnification. So you, with licensing, you go after the money. Right. So the handset manufacturers want to indemnify the developers so they're not hit with frivolous lawsuits from NPEs or non-practicing entities. These are the trolls that typically go buy companies at bankruptcy just to get those assets of intellectual property, so then they can go around suing people left and right. And this is happening right now with updating software over the internet. A few years ago, it was the BlackBerry push email, another NPE, non-practicing entity, went around and sued not just BlackBerry, but also all the carriers, Microsoft.
And BlackBerry lost that or settled it for like a large amount of money?
Yeah, it was a huge
amount. Are you talking about RIM?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a huge number. I don't know what it was.
Oh,
But
it was
huge.
like, yeah, it was, but not, they went after everyone. It wasn't just going after RIM. They were going after T-Mobile, and they were going after AT&T, and all these.
And that's where we're at right now with the massive amount of patents being purchased around mobile devices.
Yeah, like the Nortel IP.
Right.
Right.
So how did we get to this point? That because you didn't used to hear this except for maybe the fringe case of Priceline, you know, or Amazon's one-click, but it didn't really seem to come up
no
every
one talked
day.
about numbers. When Apple licensed one-click, no one really knew what that meant or why. It was really early. And then Nathan Myhrvold, who was the former CTO.
Myhrvold,
sorry. Yeah, I don't hang out with him and play poker.
No, it's okay. Nathan Myhrvold, yeah.
So he created this company, Intellectual Ventures, which was kind of like a patent aggregator. And I call it a karatsu because companies like Sony and Intel and Microsoft
have invested in
this company.
Right.
And then Myhrvold's team would go buy IP. And I guess just recently some of these names were released about who, because it was very secret.
Who's behind it, yeah.
And he'd create shell companies to buy IP.
Right.
So it was all this dark
Cloak
meetings
and
alleys, right?
Right.
So
and it seems like Google invested in like the second one, but not the first. So now he's suing them with the patents from the first one, but they're protected with the patents in the second one.
That's
I know Google was trying to get in on the buy, but they didn't, and then they bought Motorola Mobility, I think, and some IBM patent portfolio. Yeah.
So now, what's going to happen? Are we getting to the point where certain devices are going to have to just remove certain features, and those features will only be available in one set of devices?
So that's very much how the human brain would work. You know, you trade off this for that. But actually, what happens is these guys go to war, they go into courtrooms, and then they end up cross-licensing each other till the end of time. Because you might have one patent around a radio and someone else has the multi-touch, and you need that radio technology because you want to go to 4G. Right. So all this stuff crisscrosses back. So net, it's a pissing match that equals out to a zero game where all the attorneys like you make tons of money. So congratulations.
And this idea of filing patents for a living, which Jay Walker does, which Nathan Myhrvold does.
Well, Myhrvold now has changed IV because it's now an invention house.
Right.
He has some of my buddies there that are genius inventors.
He brings them in.
Building cool stuff.
And what is that like? He brings them in, they do a brainstorming session with whiteboards, and there's attorneys in the room.
Yep, and what's even better is
writing the patents as they go.
And Bill Gates comes in the room.
Yep.
And he's got the who's who. So if you're a young guy.
It's like a party.
You're hanging out with some of the brightest minds in the world.
Trying to figure out how to solve problems.
The best thing is his tool shed. And I say shed, it's his huge office with every gadget, every oscilloscope, tables that are pneumatically sheltered to run lasers across. He's got, his biggest project that I like is using lasers to burn the wings off female mosquitoes because they carry malaria. And the female mosquito wing flaps at a different rate than the male, so they're only burning off the females. I mean, my friends that work in his offices, I got a tour right when he was doing the cookbook. Right, he did this
he did that cookbook, which is into sous vide and scientific cooking.
The scientific cooking.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at all of these tools in this warehouse. I'm just falling in love. Like, this is the greatest toy store for inventors.
But is the patent office designed for this amount of this flow of patent? Clearly not.
Well, I know they're hiring examiners. The examiners have increased per art unit. I know that.
How many examiners are there? Do you guys know?
Well, I know in the art units, I think it was 2,100 and 2,400, which is the kind of the networking and software, about 600.
600 people.
Yeah.
And then you must have many more than 600 people.
Yeah, different art units have.
But you must have many more than 600 working at Nathan, Jay Walker, Microsoft, Google, and all these places. But so they're outnumbered.
But this glut of IP started in 97, 98, 99 because of the method patent and the business process patent.
Yeah, explain what that is. I mean, I know you have it here on the slide deck.
I got a slide for it. So, this method patent is a scenario or a process of going through, as I said here, a series of steps to accomplish a result. And where you think about the older method, or the older thing.
Now, when did this come out, the method patent?
This was 96, 90.
When did the method patent actually come out?
Yeah.
I mean, business methods have been around for a long time. I mean, if that's what we're talking about. I mean, one of the biggest cases that came out not too long ago.
When did the business patent emerge?
One of the biggest cases that came out was this Reid Dammann case, and this guy had we filed for a patent application on a method of investing in a hedge fund. And so it captured a lot of human activity in that process. And the Supreme Court at the end said, no, you cannot do that. You have to tie it to some machine or manufacture or transform some process. And so they shot that down because it got too abstract.
But I think the software age is really where the method patents came about, right? When the web services, interacting with a machine in some manner.
Got it. So if there's no machine involved, it's not.
I mean, that's the thing is there's different ways to claim an invention. You can have, you can have what's called a system claim, and you can have a method claim. It's kind of a way of capturing the actions of that system. And then if you're claiming the system, it's actually claiming the components of that system. So there's different ways of capturing that invention, and that plays on the damages aspect on infringement. And so you couch it all in that one application. So.
Tyler, you're going to say?
Yeah, so it looks like October 2005. I have it on my screen here. There's an interesting sort of backstory to it. This is for
the business method patent.
Business method patent. And then it says in France, 1791, France passed this. In the US, it was going back to 1799. However,
State Street comes up at some point.
Yeah, methods of doing business were not patentable. USPTO continued to require, however, that business method inventions must apply, involve, and use advance the technical arts in order to be patentable. In October 2005, USPTO's own administrative judges overturned this decision in a majority decision. The board ruled that technical art requirement could not be sustained. As such, required existed law. As such, no such requirement existed in law.
Scroll down a little bit further. Is there an Reid Dammann at the bottom of that? I think that case overruled ex parte Lundgren, which is the case you just cited, and State Street had overruled. But that was kind of the process. As things got a little too abstract, and so the Patent Office went back to some cases called Diamond versus Deere, Fluke versus Benson, and said, hey, listen, you guys need to really claim something that interacts with a computer, some machine.
Right.
And make it more tangible.
And that's where the software comes in. And there's a big movement of people saying no software patents. No patenting software.
Europe says that for the most part.
Europe does?
Yeah, Europe does not allow software claims per se. I don't think it's patentable.
Is that something that we'll see in the United States? Is that something you would endorse?
Yeah, I would not like that.
You wouldn't as an inventor.
No, and when I invent to protect my assets so I don't have other companies coming in.
You protect as a builder. You intend to build.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
So now what about this concept of, because we have to get this under control. I mean, everybody agrees that there's too many patents being filed and it's not sustainable. Do you agree with that? I mean, you're an attorney, you're profiting from it.
Well, so what do you mean it's not sustainable? I mean,
the number of patents and the broad reachingness of them, is going to stifle innovation.
I don't think that's the issue. I think the issue is access to prior art. I think that I don't think a lot of the examiners at the USPTO examine other areas of prior art. I mean, you don't know.
So they don't have enough time to?
You don't have time. There are quotas. They have certain counts they have to meet every month.
So in a perfect world, if they had 6,000 people in the software group or 60,000, maybe we could enforce this?
Maybe you could reduce the backlog. I mean, I don't know. You're talking about patents that shouldn't have been granted in the first place.
There's patents that shouldn't have been granted.
But that's the purpose of the federal court system in the first place. I mean, if someone's going to enforce a patent, then the defense, they're going to meet up in court and they're going to figure out what that patent really means and whether or not it's valid.
Right.
So those are checks and balances.
But there is a cost to doing this that will, of course, bankrupt the innovation from startup companies. So if Nathan Myhrvold, with billions of dollars himself personally and tens of billions of dollars from friends and investors, what chance does a little company, CueCat or any, who tries to create something in the future, if they've had every genius come in there, smoke weed and eat apple turnovers and come up with every crazy ideas. I'm joking that they smoke weed when they do it. But
it's a business decision. At some point they have to allocate some money for the patent system.
The government, you mean?
No, I'm talking about for a startup company.
For a startup company, but they're against giant conglomerates that are filing an inordinate amount of patents.
Yeah, but Jason, a lot of the VCs demand an IP strategy. So just as important as your domain name is, how many patents are going to protect what you're doing. So
as a society, we're basically saying we set up these rules before the concept of, huge amounts of capital being locked up by these companies with the ability to file an inordinate amount of patents. I mean, clearly I'm on the side of maybe there's too much going on here and it's stifling innovation. We're going to live in a society where nobody's going to be able to create anything new. Where are the creators going to go?
Yeah,
Europe?
But the only reason why people are creating things that are newer is because patents are being published or applications are being published. You can build up
people
those
create
ideas.
stuff new all the time without patenting, don't they?
Probably.
That's true.
Yeah.
And if they release it without having a patent.
So how do we get this out? I mean, you guys disagree that this is out of control? I mean, when we see that the mobile phone space is just not functional anymore, and people are afraid to create apps for being sued, and we,
I don't know
everybody's
if that's the case.
suing each other.
Have you heard of cases where people usually
Certainly
creators
for anything music related that people
Well, that's a
avoid
copyright
that.
issue
True.
that they won't get into, but
No,
it does
I've
seem
never
like
heard of an app developer who was passionate about his idea. Stop. It could be released, and then he might be slapped on the wrist with cease and desist or whatever.
Okay.
But yeah, that's typically not the case.
I think
Usually,
Lotus did that, went after some of the app developers.
yeah, they started going down to the app developer level and suing them in an effort to stifle creativity on the platform to get the, Android folks or the Apple folks, wherever, to just say, okay, we give up. Uncle. They want them to cry uncle.
Right.
So you guys don't perceive that there's abuse going on in the system, or
So the only
that
abuse-
it's out of control?
I don't like the non-practicing entities, the patent trolls, right? I think
So you don't think they should be allowed to exist, or they should get a shorter period of time?
Well,
How
I
should
think-
they be dealt with?
I think you should be practicing your business in order to maintain the IP for it. If you just have a shingle on a door, no one's working inside, just so you can maintain an office, so that you can go after and sue people that are actually making money or trying to run a business or bring some employment to this country because you have a patent, that's the way it should be done.
I like that idea. Just the problem with that is sometimes you have inventors that come out with very, very big ideas. Ideas that they have no money to implement whatsoever. And so their only recourse really is to try to get a license from companies. And so to produce a product or get the software even coded takes an enormous amount of money. And so some of these small inventors, they don't have it. So what are they to do? Then all of a sudden when they enforce their rights, they're considered NPEs or patent trolls. And I can't agree with that. I mean, I think there needs to be a distinction between NPEs and patent trolls and this small inventor who doesn't have the funds. What do they do?
Yeah, and so what's the patent reform at this point? What's the state of patent reform?
Well, I know Obama just signed the first to file, or the Patent Act just recently.
And so
goes
how
in-
does that change things?
Well, I mean, now it's a kind of a race to the patent office. Before it was first to invent. The rest of the world is first to file. So
So what does that mean in English to
it
a
means
founder?
It almost means that you need to produce quickly. You need to do your research, and you need to get it done. And you need to file a patent application as soon as you can.
Well, no, doesn't it mean the opposite? You have to file, not produce.
Well, when I mean produce, I mean actually come up with an enabling disclosure and get the invention.
You mean
up to
produce
a
the
point where-
documents?
Produce the documents, yeah.
You don't have to actually produce it.
No.
It changed the way I do IP now because now I'm filing provisionals. In the past, I'd wait and do a full dissertation, have everything very formally written, then file. Now I do provisional just to get the clock ticking. Right now I have a year to fill out the details, but instead of having, in the past it was, I'd go back to my logbook and say, okay, here's where I did prototyping, here's the email chain. I'd be able to build the proof that I invented it through my own writing and through my own logging. But that's not the case anymore. Now it's, you want to get that clock ticking as fast as possible in the USPTO through a submission.
So this actually screws the individual making stuff and puts the
onus is on the inventor now.
Right, but now instead of just having to create something in their garage, they have to file an edition, and that means it's another advantage for Nathan Myhrvold and for the patent
exactly.
trolls.
But a provisional is relatively easy. It's thousands of dollars versus tens of thousands. So,
but it's thousands of dollars, and it's still, the person who invented something previously would then have, if I invented, this incredible new screwdriver system, just twice as strong as a regular one.
I'd like to hear about that.
Yes. And then you file a patent for it a year later,
Yeah.
and I haven't filed, does that mean you win? in this new system?
You mean if he gets a patent granted and he enforces it against you?
Yeah.
You say, I've been using this since 2010.
Yeah.
You've got documentation?
Yeah.
I mean, the
then I have to fight?
The question is whether or not something is public, whether or not what you have done is public, is prior art.
Right.
Which goes back to what we were talking about before.
So then, in a practical case, if you were doing it, previously if you were doing it privately, but you had documentation of it, personal documentation?
That's still not prior art, though. I mean, the government wants to reward you for disclosing your invention. And so if you're sitting there doing it behind closed doors, you're not doing anything to help innovation at all.
Got it. And so really the goal here is to promote innovation. And this gets people out in the sunlight showing what they've done quicker?
You would think so. You would think so.
So if people file quicker, then more people can see because they look at what's going on in the patent and trademark office.
You can build off those
Then
ideas.
you can build on top of it. So we're supposed to be accelerating innovation.
Sure.
But it also eliminates the ambiguity of an inventor's logbook, which those are serialized, page by page, and you could, they could be forged, right?
Right.
If it's in the USPTO as a filing, then you can't forge that.
Yeah,
so
I mean, the logbooks come into play when folks file patents within a certain time period of each other, file patent applications. They used to have these things called interference proceedings. And what you try to do is you had enough evidence in your logbook or something like that to come up with your date of conception before the other person did. And as long as you reduced it to practice, then you were entitled to that invention. But those interference proceedings are gone now with the Patent Act. It's all done.
Got it. And so, what is this logbook? I've never heard of this before. Is this like a standard procedure for an inventor to have a logbook?
Well, I used to tell a lot of my clients to have a logbook and talk about, because you always had to talk about the conception date and the reduction to praxis during these interference proceedings. It's also present in other parts of prosecution, but there's this due diligence period, and an examiner wants to make sure that if you worked 40 hours a week, then on the weekends you did X, Y, and Z, and you accounted for all your time. And so that's considered due diligence. So if you could connect the conception to the reduction to practice with sufficient due diligence, as determined by the examiner, then it's okay. So that's where that kind of comes into play.
So if it went to the mat and there was a lawsuit over it, they would look at this in this logbook.
It's not really a lawsuit. These are proceedings inside the USPTO before anything's granted.
Got it. Now, when something is granted, is that written in stone or can it be overturned?
Well, yeah, I mean, you have litigation all the time with patents that are termed invalid.
And that is the way to overturn it. You go to litigation.
Generally.
As opposed to you talk to the Patent and Trademark Office.
Well, what happens in a lot of these cases is you go to a Markman proceeding. And
a what proceeding?
They're called Markman. It's some case, Markman versus Westview.
Got it.
So it's between both the parties and the judge, and they determine exactly what these claims mean. So both parties argue under the interpretation of all these different claims. And the plaintiff wants it to read on whatever the defendant's doing. Defendant doesn't want it to read on what the defendant is doing, but the defendant would like it also to read on the prior art so he can invalidate the patent. So at that time, you're trying to figure out what these mean, but sometimes these patents are held invalid, and then it's no longer enforceable. What happens a lot of the time is during these cases in the federal court, the defendant will file what's called a reexamination proceeding, basically sending that patent back through the USPTO to check it again, and that takes forever. So. And they examine it for validity to make sure that...
Is that what's happening now with all these wireless patents? They're all just trying to send each other to have their patents re-examined? And
it's a strategy. That's a strategy.
So I could just say it's invalid and...
Well, if you're being sued and you're in court, you move for that re-examination proceeding, and generally the federal court will stay their proceedings until the USPTO is done.
And the PTO is way behind.
I had a client, we were sitting in re-examination for 6 years, so it takes a long time.
So... my read of that is, if they only last 20 years, we're in this great, giant cluster F of a stalemate as an industry, the technology industry.
Yeah, with 20 years, you can have, how many companies have you launched in 20 years?
No, of course, but even still, I mean, if you've got to wait 6 years for justice, right? Or 6 years to be re-examined, actually. You're waiting 6 years to be re-examined in that case. That's not even justice. Then you got another 5-year court case or something.
Well, then you got damages that you can reach back 6 years from the date you filed the complaint. So treble damages for willful infringement. I mean, you're going to be compensated if you're successful, but 95% of these cases don't even make it to trial. They all settle. They're just too expensive.
It's too expensive.
Yeah, it's too expensive to defend.
And let's talk about the damages, because we saw some people have huge damages like RIM, I guess.
Yeah, huge
and what does this mean, treble?
Well,
sounds like treble from Star Trek.
You get treble damages and attorney's fees if there's notice. If the defendant already knew of the patent and went forward anyway without an opinion or an infringement letter, that kind of thing. And they just said the heck with it. And so when they got sued, you can get treble damages and attorney's fees. It's one of your remedies.
So if somebody says, I have a patent in this space, and they have to have a lawyer send you that letter, they can't just like call you on the phone or email you.
You can send it in a cease and desist letter.
She sent a cease and desist letter.
You say, we got this patent, you're doing X, Y, and Z, you might want to take a look at this.
Got it.
That kind of
And they would ignore it and continue working.
Generally they ignore it.
Yeah. Right, and then they build some huge company, and then that's where it can come in.
Right.
So in the case of RIM, those people who had this patent on email must have informed them at some point, hey, you were thinking...
You would think so.
You would think so in that case. So we don't
in
that
the
was
RIM
a weird
case,
deal, though, because they bought intellectual property at bankruptcy, and it was... they might have tried to go back for treble before they owned it. I think there were some...
Yeah, I don't know about the details of that.
There's some shenanigans going on there for sure. But they got, $500 million or $1 billion or whatever it was. So they made it worth their while.
I haven't experienced any patent litigation in the internet space. Is this common in the internet website, mobile space?
You personally haven't? No.
I haven't, and I haven't seen it happen.
It's good. Yeah.
I'm talking about specifically in the web. Mobile web, consumer web.
So
it doesn't seem to come up that often.
So when I raised a lot of money with companies, or when I was working at Radio Shack as their in-house inventor, when you have that type of visibility, then everyone climbs out of the woodwork to say that you're doing exactly what they dreamed about years ago.
Right.
Right. So it's these high visibility companies that really get the knocking on the door.
Interesting. So what's the advice for startups? Should they be spending, this large amount of money doing this picket fence strategy for consumer web, and business process patents and stuff like that? Do you think they should be?
I think if you're a small company, you should at least have a couple patents, right? Something that's core to your business. And you should, talk to different attorneys, because the first one you talk to might not be the right one because their domain experience isn't correct for your application. And talk to your friends. If you're a software guy versus a hardware guy, who do your friends in the same spaces use for their intellectual property, right? I've got several that I choose from based upon what I'm working on. So if you can get your core technology protected, if you want to build a strong business, you really need that these days.
Interesting. Tyler?
The only thing I can say was the experience I had going through it with Reid was actually in some ways much trickier than I thought it was going to be, and in some ways much easier.
How so?
The parts that I thought were going to be easy aren't, and the parts that I thought were going to be laborious and whatever actually he made quite simple. You got to really get into drawings and how everything connects. It was like
that was complicated.
Yeah, but it's actually kind of good for yourself to make it all very clear in your head what exactly you're doing.
What exactly you're trying to protect.
Yeah. It's very drawing based initially when you're doing the provisional patent, which I didn't necessarily think that, and I have to get into like diagrams.
Who draws all these things? You have to hire an artist?
I've got drafters I use sometimes, and I use PowerCAD and AutoCAD and things like that, so you can do it yourself pretty quickly.
You can do them yourself.
Yeah. It's very much flowcharty, though, when you think about
software, it's boxes and lines, really. It's not the biggest deal in the world.
Yeah, and sometimes really bad drawings of people's hands, like in this Apple patent where you see this, I guess that's it right there.
Yeah. That's, who did that? Someone from The Simpsons, I think, did that.
It looks like Homer Simpson, yeah. And people are camped on when you submit, is that a public process? Or is it only public when does it become public?
Because when it gets published. So it gets published by default, published 18 months from the date of filing or the date of priority. So then it becomes public, but before that, no. And you can actually request non-publication until grant, so it could be secret the entire time and no one would know.
And what makes their decision to do that or not do it?
It depends on your space. I mean, it depends on the space. If you're an inventor that doesn't want your competitor to see what you're doing so they can build off the idea, and generally it happens in those areas where they've got a short shelf life, a couple years, 3 years, tops. And so if someone sees the invention, builds or just uses it, it's published, and they go and they produce it, make their money and take off, then there's really not much you can do about it.
That's the whole trade secret thing I was talking about, where sometimes you don't want to reveal your secret sauce.
And the big trade secret stuff is Coca-Cola and Mother's Cookies, I guess. They kept that composition secret.
This is why fashion doesn't have a chance, because this pace of iteration is so fast.
And you can't patent that shirt with a big...
Well, this is why. It's because, like, but they have to produce new stuff by 3 months from now. Every 3 months you have to do
I know, but
stuff,
you couldn't patent a shirt.
I've seen design patents on pockets before, things like that.
On a pocket?
Yeah.
Like a certain type of stitching or something? Huh. Fascinating. Well, I don't know if we've exactly figured this whole space out, but I feel like I'm much more educated on it.
Okay. That's we aim to please.
Well, it would have been a better debate if I had an anti-patent person here, to be honest, because I feel like you're very pro-patent and you're very pro-patent.
Right.
And I'm very confused, about the whole subject. So I feel more educated, but I don't feel like we've... The anti-patent contingent was represented particularly well in this episode.
So the Electronic Frontier Foundation, the EFF, they have a anti-patent process, a league of anti-troll attorneys they're creating.
Wow.
So that'd be good for your viewers at home to
check out.
Yeah.
So if I guess the bottom line is, whenever you have these systems become too ingrained on one side, too favoring of one side, you might get something like the EFF coming out and saying, hey, we'll try to defend people against this. They've done a pretty good job when people do anti-fair use, copyright kind of things, like, oh, you can't use that, you can't write criticism of something. They'll come to bat for a blogger or something doing valid criticism.
And that's at EFF.org.
EFF.org.
One other piece relevant to startups is Brad Feld comes to mind, has been quite vocal about wanting to, stop the software patenting in the U.S.
Yeah.
And I think there's a growing kind of movement amongst the startup venture capitalists that it would make their lives much easier if it's not necessarily worth all the headache for the startups they invest in.
Let me thank my guests, Reid Dammann. I got it right.
You did? Yeah.
Property attorney, and Dave Mathews, the founder and CEO of NeuAer, and also the creator of the fabulous CueCat. You'll always have that.
One of many. We had such a great team on that project. Like 280, 300 some odd employees.
That was a great episode when you told all those stories. We won't go into it now, but people should go check out the episode you were on. 70 granted patents, huh?
71, yeah.
How do you pay for all that? You do it personally?
No, a lot of times it's with companies or in entities. Right? So personal is tricky, but I try and build
But I see people's
entities.
name, like the people from Apple. We're looking at, there was like some dude's name on there.
Yeah, so if you look at the patent,
he gets his name on the patent.
You'll see several people. You'll see the top name, which is kind of like the ringleader, the guy that says, all right, here's what we're going to do. Then everyone else in the room that was inventing and building this together. It's very much a team effort.
Right.
And then the patent attorney, and then most importantly is the assignee. And the assignee, in my case, has been Radio Shack or Slingbox or my company NeuAer.
Yeah.
So it's that.
So basically, I get credited as an individual, but the company gets the ownership.
And some companies like Radio Shack paid bonuses. Like I put a plan in place that we'd have an innovation strategy, and as if you were a part of the inventor group, when it would grant, people would get 1,000, 5,000, whatever. So
they would get paid for a
bonus from the company,
granting,
right? Because the company Radio Shack.
What about this, like the royalty on the patent? Like you hear that term sometimes.
Yeah, so that depends if you license it. And there's a company, Ocean Tomo, which helps you sell and license patents. There's another RPX Corporation in San Francisco, which just IPO'd, and they're a patent licensor as well. So it's a little different from Intellectual Ventures, which is more of a Karatsu, and RPX, which is more of a patent bank.
So RPX, you give them your patent, they go and figure out ways to monetize it, and they take half the amount, or?
The relationship, you have to negotiate everything, right? Sometimes, if I have a patent that I already licensed on my own, then I have to identify that group and then let RPX relicense it to other groups, so the patent might not have as much value to them. So it depends. So
RPX might look at it and say, this is a really valuable patent, we'll take 25% of whatever we license. Another one, they might say, well, we're not sure about this one, but we'll do 50-50 with you.
Yeah, it'll
take more work.
It all depends. And sometimes they just want to buy them outright and own every bit of that asset.
Every bit of that asset.
I've heard of cases where just either buying it outright or getting a percentage of the litigation. So certain companies will fund the litigation and give the inventor or the assignee a percentage.
Right. So why doesn't somebody just raise a ton of money, put a bunch of intelligent people in a building, and just file patents all day?
It's called Acacia.
I know. What's that called?
It's called Acacia. Acacia Research does that.
Acacia Research does that, and obviously Nathan Myhrvold does it and brings people in. So I mean, it basically means Invention is going to where do they stand in terms of the amount they're filing? Does anybody know? Like, how many does intellectual ventures own compared to IBM or Google? Or they're in the top 5, top 10.
IBM's still number one.
IBM's number one, yeah.
I've got a slide on that actually.
And why? Because they have so many people working there?
Yeah, it's amazing. They went from manufacturing so much stuff to being just such a force of creating IP that's licensed to so many other people. So January 10th, 2011, IBM announced that its inventors received a record 5,896 patents in the year 2010. Look at that.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
And they have 40,000, so 1/8 have come in the last.
Yeah, look at that. 50
in 1
years
year
to get their first 5,000. So
50 years to get the first 5,000, and then they did 5,000 in one time. Wow.
Yeah.
That is insane.
This is some of the stuff that is anti-patent, the copyleft and that slide here,
the
where open
ones.
source and Creative Commons. And
yeah, sure. People putting stuff out and just saying, hey, take it. Now, if I do that and then you try to patent it and I've already made it open source and
it's done.
It's done. They can't go backwards. So, interesting.
And even if someone comes up and asserts that you're in violation of their patent, there's ways to get other engineers in the room and say, hey, let's go about it this way. Let's change the process enough that it's a material difference. So this is why, as an inventor, I want to have the broadest patent possible. I want to have my first claim being something that no one can reverse engineer, and those subsequent claims going down different verticals that they might be able to try and attack on.
And that's basically the picket fences.
Yep.
Even inside of one
within
patent,
one,
you might have a bunch of different pieces of the fence.
That's right.
A moat and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Well, get yourself a good attorney on this, because this seems like, I was coming to this with, I wonder if people could, one thought idea I had was, I wonder if people in semi-protest to this should start filing just dozens of their own handwritten patents or personally written patents.
Yeah, not feasible.
And it just doesn't seem feasible. But like, if every startup said, you know what, we're going to every 1 day a month write our own patents and submit them, not to flood the office, but valid patents, but just to make it so murky that the system sort of collapses on itself and we get real patent reform.
But the office challenges you. They go back and forth, sometimes for years, saying you cannot patent this because they do some research, or they, their database searching is much more sophisticated. Even my patent attorney, I'm sure you have a system that you pay thousands of dollars per month for to search through the patent. If all I have access to is the uspto.gov website, which is kind of it's a tricky site to search through.
Yeah. Google has patents in their database, google.com/patents.
Yeah, that's kind of cute, right? My favorite is pat2pdf.net, which lets me print, or .org, which lets me print out patents. Actually, this is a good site here.
Good slide, yeah.
Good slide to show. These are kind of my tools that I use as an inventor. So the first is the U.S. government's office, and you can search trademarks as well. I do this a lot when I'm naming companies. First, I'll come up with a name, I'll Google search it to see how unique it is, and then I'll look to see if there's a trademark on it. Pat2PDF actually takes a PDF from the US government site and assembles it into just what it looks like from the inventor. Where a lot of these sites like Google or even the USPTO site,
it looks ugly.
They just have the text, sometimes they don't have the drawings.
Yeah, it's not very helpful.
And then the Google patent is only 7 million indexed. Patent Storm is like a splog kind of site for patents. And then
what do you mean a splog?
A splog, like a spam blog, where you can view the patent, but there's link bait all over it.
Oh, I got you.
So it's a mess. And then my favorite of all is the old IBM patent engine. I think they had a cute, cooler name for it a few years ago, but it's a Delphion site. And there you can see the oddities. You can see the weird patents.
Fascinating. Well, this is going to take a lot more research. I think we have to have the anti-patent people on for the next one to sort of get the full robustness of the argument, which I couldn't really, with my knowledge base, defend. But thanks again, Reid and Dave and Tyler. And if you want to participate in the building of the show, which this came out of the TWiST list, a lot of people discussing patents and what are they and how they work. And this is really going to be a two-parter. Next time we'll have the anti-patent folks on. or the patent reform people, whatever it is. Go to twistlist.co and join the mailing list. Become part of the back channel discussion, 2, 4, 10, 20, $100 a month, whatever you want to donate to the show, as it were, to support independent media like this, which you cannot get anywhere else. Thanks again to MailChimp and SurveyMonkey for sponsoring the program. We'll see you all next time.